explorers, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about Java 24. This is going to be a long video with a lot of content, and if you want to support this channel, there are links in the video description to affiliates and also to donations. And let's jump right into it and switch over to my screen here. So Java 24, it has a release date of 25 March 18th, and I have called this experimental escalation. And the reason I did that is because now that the 23 is out, which is the long time supported release, they have really ramped up the development and have a lot of JEPs in development and is going into the next release in like 3 years or so. So it's gonna be really impactful, this release. There is a lot of stuff in it. So the first JEP we have here is 404, not found. It's the generational Shinoa. So the Shinoa is already out and default in the Java environment as a GC, but they want to make it generational to reduce the memory footprint and also reduce the CPU and power usage, but they want to still contain the same high throughput. So it's more of an improvement, trying to make this model even better for general use cases. Next up, we have the compact header object headers, which is also experimental. And this is object as a bunch of headers in order to keep track of them. And these are quite large at the moment. They could be 128 bits or even 196 bits. They want to reduce that to 64 bits. It should reduce the general object size as well and the memory footprint. It will probably get a better throughput as well, up to 5% they are thinking or hoping for. And it also will introduce measurable, it shouldn't introduce any measurable latency on 64-bit platforms. So hopefully they will succeed with this. It's just an experiment at the moment, but they are trying it out. There is a bunch of flags that can turn this feature on. Next up, we have JEP 472, preparing to restrict the use of JNI. So they have a new feature now that you can use in order to run functionality in external tools like this foreign function. And those are much more capable and much better. So they are trying to make JNI less useful because it's gonna be deprecated in the future. So they are removing features and trying to warn people about not using them and so on. It's not removed yet, it's still usable, but they are moving in that direction, so you should move there too. Next up, we have the late barrier expansion for G1, and it's pretty much a thing that tries to improve the memory footprint again for things that are running in the cloud over and over and over again, and running this JIT compiler C2. And when that hits the G1 as a garbage collector, there is using a lot of memory. So they are trying to reduce that and make that compiler work even better. Next up, we have a new key derivation function API, and this is to simplify implementations of key generations and key use inside of the JDK. So if you want to implement new functionality for security, this API will help you with functions that you should implement in order to use them in hashing algorithms and key generation algorithms. So it's an interesting new preview function API. It's still in the works, so nothing is really set in stone. Next up, we have removing the Windows 32 bits x86 port. So this has been deprecated for a couple of releases now. Now it's gone. So now they will not compile this anymore. That's well, it have been a huge headache, but now they can actually remove it and start working and testing just the newer code. Next up, we have ahead of time clause loading and linking. So this is a way of implementing a functionality that you could do ahead of time compilation and cache it. So you will get a quicker startup of your Java application. Most Java applications start up in the same way and do similar tasks as it starts up and ramps up. So having that start up quicker by reducing the amount of compilation that is required is really nice. So they have looking at this kind of a setup where you try to do a recording. So first off, you record some kind of configuration where you record what is happening in the application when you start it up in a very general use case. And then you create a cache file with that configuration, which is the next step. And the last is the general load and running of the application. And this should be reducing the startup time with a significant amount. So it's going to be interesting to see. This is definitely something I will try out with the new Java version. Next up, we have the 484 JEP, which is the class file API. This is something that I've looked at previously. This is something that will be ratified in this version. So it will become something that you can use. It's pretty much a way of writing your own class files. So if you have something that can parse Java code or anything else, and you want to create something that is runnable in your JDK, this is a way of doing that. Next up, we have the Stream Gatherers API. This is also something that they want to ratify and put into this Java version. 485 is the JEP for that. And it looks something like this. They haven't changed the API much since last release. So it's a way of gathering information in a stream in order to do some operations. So for instance, you could have this gatherer of a sliding window where you get two objects and then you can filter depending on those two objects, and then we'll get a list in the end when we have gone through the full source of this flow. We could also have this fix window of 3 to lists, so we get lists of lists and so on. So it's a very interesting API that could be useful for a lot of different things. Next up, we have the JEP 486, which is the permanently disable the security manager. So the security manager has been deprecated for a long time and haven't been used for security at all for a long time. And they now want to disable it, so it will not be able to start or run in any use case, so they can remove it in later releases. So if you haven't switched off using it by now, then this is an indicator because you will not have it there. But it's not removed, and you could probably start it with a very warning big flag, this should not be used in the future kind of way. But removing it from your application is definitely something you will need to look into. Next up, we have scoped values. This is a 4th preview. They are continuing working on this. I have no use case for it yet. It's where you can set something that is scoped for the current call, something that you generate and create at some place and then use it in a different context later on. So it's a static value that is only available during the current call. So it's an interesting thing, but not something that I will use in the future. Next up, we have JEP 488. So these are the primitive types in patterns, instance of, and switch. We have now got an implementation where we can use classes for different operations in these kind of tasks. So adding primitive types to that is, of course, welcome. This is their 2nd preview, so they are not done yet. This is the slides I've been viewing earlier, so you check if some integer is of type byte, and then you can just use it later on. It's the last one thing here, and then you up here can check if something is an integer and larger than 100, and you could issue a gold card or something like that. So you can use checks to see if it's a particular type and then do something about it. Next up, we have the Vector API. This is the 9th incubator. So they have actually taken the Vector API and put it back into incubator mode. And it's now waiting for the Valhalla project to be complete before they can actually release it out. This is a little bit of a setback, but not something that I wasn't expecting. They have worked with it for a while, but without having a stable base, it's going to be hard to actually get it up and running. Next up, we have 490. So they will remove the the non-generational mode in ZGC. This is probably not something that you use. It's not something that is default. And the generational mode is much better, much more proficient and quicker, less memory footprint and everything. So using this old mode is probably not something that is recommended, and now it's removed. So it will not be available in the next Java release. Next up, we have 491, synchronized virtual threads without pinning. So now they have added virtual threads. That was a big topic in previous Java releases. So now you can have small threads that is multiple. So you can have millions of small threads that are running in the JVM. And instead of scheduling them to a particular process in your system, so you have a OS thread, you will have a JDK that schedules that for you. So the JDK will start up a bunch of OS threads and then do small pieces of work on these kind of virtual threads instead. And they also want to add in the functionality to release a particular thread if it encounters some IO wait or something like that. So if you're waiting for something over the network or from a file or something like that, you want to release that back so the virtual thread can work on something else. And when you did that to release earlier, it was actually pinned to the current process, so only a new thread for that process was chosen. But now they want to have the scheduler be able to pick up and run on any other process as well. So you get a faster, a better throughput of the workloads. So this is interesting and something to keep a lookout for. Next up, we have 492, which is the flexible constructor bodies. And it's pretty much a way of helping you doing certain tasks when you have a constructor. So, for instance, if you have a constructor that requires a particular value, or it will throw an exception or can't work really. So, in this case, you can do some small amount of work before you actually call the super function. And in this case, we have the positive big int value, and it will throw an exception if the value is less than 0, and it will not generate that big int value at all. So this is a good use case. It's an interesting thing. I have had a few small instances where I wanted to do some operation before super, mainly changing a value before it went into the super class or generating a value and so on. So this could be really interesting. Next up, we have the JEP 493, which is linking runtime images without JMods. This is for the workloads in the cloud, when you want the JDK to be as small as possible. And the image that you create of the JDK is of a certain type, and it contains both the actual running core of the JDK and then also a bunch of JMods, which is application-specific things that you are using, base libraries and so on. And not all our applications are actually using those. They might use their own compiled classes, or some of the features in Java is not required for this particular image. And if you remove all the JMods, you could reduce the size of your image by 25%. This is something you do during the build of the image, so not all builders of the Java JDK will, of course, build with those kind of flags. The most general case will probably be the full JDK with all the functionality, but now they have added that possibility. Next up, we have 494, which is the module import declaration. And this is to simplify the list of imports, because that can be huge. Can be a lot of imports that is required for one class. And taking those base modules and loading them as a package will help and reduce the amount of clutter pretty much. So this is an example. If you're using the Java base and the Java SQL, then you can import those as module and have all of them. Of course, if you have ambiguous classes like date, you need to have a separate import statement to say which date you are using in this particular class. But at least the import statement will be less impactful. Hopefully this will be built into the different IntelliJ and Eclipse and so on, the different editors, because imports are seldomly something I think about. I usually have my editor think about that and fixing my imports. So this is something, an implementation detail perhaps, but the classes could be easier to read. One thing I'm a little bit hesitant about is that I don't know everything that is in Java Base and Java SQL, for instance. So the modules could hide functionality and where things actually are placed. That could be an issue. Next up, we have JEP 495, the simple source files and instance main methods. So this is a way of hiding some of the complexity of Java, or the way of Java actually being very explicit about what is going on. So in Java, you write a lot of code in order to show that this is of this particular type, it has this kind of a visibility and this kind of use cases, which is very descriptive, and it's very well documented as well. So if you write code in Java in the right way, you get code that talks for itself. You don't really need to write that many comments to explain things, because Java does most of the explaining for you. But if you are starting out and never built a Java program at your own, you might want to have less clutter around it to show off. So to get a good hello world, you of course just want the main method and hello world. So this will be allowed in the future. Not something I will use, because I usually write more complex things when you will want to have that kind of documenting code. But for a very small script, this could be a use case. Next up, we have JEP 496, the quantum resistor model lattice-based key encapsulation mechanism. And it is very close to the 497, which is the quantum resistor model lattice-based digital signature algorithm. And both of these are things that you want to use if you want the latest of security when you are creating hashes and when you are creating keys for your different applications. Because in the future, we might have quantum computers if they ever figure that one out, and then they will turn all encryption upside down, and some things will not be secure anymore. So this is a preparation for the future, pretty much. Next up, we have 498, which is a warning upon use memory access methods in SunMISC usafe. So this have been deprecated for a long time now, and they can't just remove it because there is companies still using these unsafe methods. but they have tried to mitigate it by implementing this foreign functions and memory API, which you should use instead. And they really want to deprecate and remove it, and it has been deprecated for a while, but they can't still remove it because some people haven't haven't moved away from it. So now you actually will get a warning. We will remove it soon. So stop using it, please. Try to migrate over to the foreign function and memory API instead. Next up, we have 449, the structured concurrency, and this is the fourth preview, so we have talked about this a bunch of times. It's where you have two different forks doing two different operations, and then you join the flow afterwards in order to return one result to the end user. So this is a very useful case where you can see that both of the tasks actually succeeded, or else you will throw an error and don't respond in the normal way. Next up we have JEP 501, which is the last one, and this is the 30-bit x86 port, and it will be deprecated for removal. So the general 32-bit Java is now marked for removal. So hopefully we will not have any more 32-bit versions of Java in the future. So this was a long video. I hope that you liked this video. Give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave those in the comment section down below. Which Java 24 feature was most interesting to you? Something you want to play around with, or something you want me to dive deeper into? Leave a comment about that as well. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and I really hope to see you in the next video.